A very good day, everyone. This is Daniele Catteddu, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Cloud Security Alliance. It's a great pleasure for me to be with you today. We're going to discuss about trust at the speed of change. We're going to cover the continuous control and accountability challenges for critical infrastructure in the area of cloud and AI. The presentation is going to be structured in two main parts. Part one are going to basically describe the challenges and the issues at hand. The second part is going to be about some of the solutions that CSA has been working on, especially within the context of the Compliance Automation Revolution Initiative, CAR in short. Let's get into it. So let's start with some numbers that describe the dimension of the problem we are facing. When we look at the compliance, so immediately the words fatigue, cost come to mind. In terms of cost, we have seen several statistics that have been collected by numerous institutions. The European Commission 2 years ago projected over 150 billions in cost, in administrative cost and compliance. That is not hard to believe, given that, for instance, there are 18 critical sector within the supervision of the NIS2 directive. That is not even kind of the scary number. One data point that got definitely my attention is this 43% of the C-suite and board member time that is devoted to compliance in banking. Now, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of resources from very senior, important people within the organization. Arguably, as we are talking about the financial sector, for this specific figure is something to be somewhat expected, given that financial institutions are certainly the ones with the higher pressure and challenges from the compliance perspective, but nevertheless, it's over like 40% of the time of senior leadership that is going into compliance. And then we got the 60% figure, which speaks about how dated is our approach, because 60% of the GRC practitioners are still using spreadsheets, so tools of the previous century. Those are some of the numbers. In terms of description of the landscape, well, what we have seen and shown, I mean, this is one of those slides that I had in my presentation related to GRC for a very long time. And this is just a small snapshot and a sample of what the real situation is all about. In the real world, there are hundreds of different overlapping laws and regulation. The ones you see now on screen are just a small sample of them. In EU, for instance, we got the NIS2, we got the Cyber Resilience Act, the EU AI Act, we got DORA, we got GDPR, taking also into consideration that for some of those directives, then there is a national implementation within the European member states. Well, Europe is now certainly a unique case. Even the United States has a bunch of laws and regulation applicable to critical sector. And then, of course, then there are the global standards, ISO, SOC 2, and of course, the CSA work on STAR, CCM, and AICM. Now, it's not just about the number of laws and regulation. It's also an issue of moving target, of sequence of different enforcement and part of the requirements to be implemented, which are making this process extremely painful. So starting from 2024 as a unit of reference, going into 2027 and then eventually 2028, yes, you can see in this timeline, there are a bunch of different requirements that will need to be implemented. And with that in mind, there is not, so the issue of excessive regulation, if you like, or fatigue is coupled with two other trends. So from one side, the velocity of the technology change, and the last few months and years has been certainly an extremely good sample of what I'm talking about, with the convergence between IT and OT. Operational infrastructure always more connected to IT. In presence, though, they're two very different culture, and that sometimes are not even compatible. Then, of course, we have AI reaching the operation, and it seems, according to some latest survey that we have conducted in collaboration with Ajuna, that 62% of organizations are already of financial institutions are already deploying agents. And then the complexity of the supply chain that is also testified by the explosion of the non-human identities within our organization. Apparently, the current ratio is about 96:1, which is a bit scary. Now, if from one side we got this high velocity and speed of change in our environment, the assurance is not really keeping up, because we still have annual audits and point-in-time certification. We still have manual gathering of screenshots and spreadsheets. And still, we got the issue of controls that are sampled and tested very often after the fact. Not just velocity of the technology, but also velocity in the change of threats. So ENISA recently published a paper, or last year published a paper, in which was highlighting that 18% of the identified threats in their report is now aiming at operational technologies. But this is like a generalized trend where ransomware are becoming completely industrialized, where state sponsors are getting a foothold into the critical infrastructure for energy, water, and transportation in order to have a future disruption. We see an increased focus from activists on the operational technology. And then finally, and of course, the AI augmented attacks. Which is very well, testified and represented by the Mythos moment that we have lived back at the end of April this year, which I think has been a sudden moment of realization for many in the industry, because it has been clear that from now on, the capabilities for cybersecurity from large language model are such that they can completely transform and disrupt the industry, for bad or for good, if we are very proactive in using those tools. Nevertheless, I mean, it's something that we should be very cognizant about. Now, something that I think this picture, I believe, it very well represents and summarizes what I'm trying to say, because we see that with the increased speed of change in technology, threats, and regulation, and with the maintenance of the point-in-time approach, the assurance gap is widening. And at the end of the day, every year, the same audit is going to buy you much less assurance. Now, it's nothing changed. What is going to happen is this perpetuation of the compliance theater, where compliance is not really the byproduct of security, a natural way to show how good you have been in building your security posture, but it's rather like a theater of dashboards with green and yellows that are the only part that are interesting to the to some executive. And this theater is based on lack of observability or challenges in building the right visibility into your infrastructure. It depends on the diffuse accountability, where everyone is responsible and nobody is really, and then with the duplication of the efforts. So with congested pipeline that need to satisfy the different laws or regulation that very often, as we said, they completely overlap in terms of requirements. Now, with that in mind, the only way out, it speaks to evidence-based trust, to the idea of trust to verify. So not rocket science, but a solid and robust work for the collection of the proper evidence with the right level of quality, the right time, and in a continuous fashion, in order to build that process of continuous accountability that necessarily has to be based on strong and reliable evidence. The system that we want to build, it's based on a rather simple loop that starts with the harmonization of the control baseline. So taking all the requirements and harmonizing them and mapping them against a fixed set of rules, like, for instance, the framework that we proposed, CCM and the ICM. the automation of the evidence, the continuous testing, the exchange of the information and evidence in a machine-readable format, OSCAL, for instance, that in order to build that process of effective accountability. And that system, that simple loop I was describing, inherits the great work that many have already done in the space of IT. So the same logic and the same philosophy as a code that we have used to transform IT, so infrastructure as code, policy as code, compliance as code, and security as code, is the same logic that we need to apply to compliance and governance in order to achieve that process, that target of continuous assurance and continuous compliance. And to that effect, CSA, as I mentioned earlier, has been working now for, well, officially for almost a year and a half with the launch of the initiative, even though the foundational and driving ideas behind the car initiative are there since the very beginning of the CSA journey into the space of GRC. That dates back into 2011 with the creation of the STAR program. Now, the Compliance Automation Revolution Initiative, it's broad-based coalition of industry leaders. They are very cognizant of the problem we are facing in terms of excessive cost of compliance, fatigue, ineffectiveness, in order to build a system that is going to move into the new area of compliance, which is based on the logic of automation and continuous validation. The mission of CAR and some of the core actions that we're going to bring forward are the shifting of compliance left and the enabling of the idea of compliance by design and by default, the fostering of automation for both compliance and security, as well as the fostering of the harmonization. And to note here that when we say harmonization of legal and regulatory requirements, certainly we are not leaving the illusion that we can condition the will of laws or regulators, which are going to be necessarily continue of producing their national laws or regulation, but rather to reconcile those to a single set of requirements through a process of standardization. And then finally, achieving that goal of continuous assurance and continuous monitoring and enabling a better approach to risk management through a better risk quantification. The actions that we're going to take are going to be grouped in four main buckets on category. There's going to be actions that are devoted to the harmonization of the landscape, actions that are devoted to the engineering of those controls and those requirements into our infrastructure and code, the automation of the process, and the continuous verification. This is explained in a bit more details here, where we got these four phases that from the analysis, definition, and designing of the controls up until the engineering component that translates the control objective into technical control and then in code, and then building framework and specification for continuous monitoring and auditing, we can finally achieve the continuous auditing-based certification, and then representing through dashboarding the information that we have collected. To that effect, within the context of this CAR initiative, we're going to have three working groups. One of them has been already operational for over a year, is the Security Control Catalog, which essentially merged the previous work that CSA has done with the Cloud Control Metrics Working Group and the AI Control Metrics Working Group, extending it, making it like a publicly available repository that is going to be offering information connected to the controls that we developed in a machine, both in human and human language in a machine-readable format. For your information, the GitHub repository is likely to be made available around the end of this year. With that said, what we notice is certainly a certain convergency of the regulators' demand in terms of demanding evidence and proof for resilience, enforcing oversight for AI services, and all that basically force us to have a very pragmatic approach in order to get better. They start essentially with some very short-term actions, like the mapping of your obligation and the inventory of your evidence sources and the attribution of the role and responsibility, to transition in a later stage to the automation of the collection, the embedding of the controls within the ICD pipeline, and the convergence between IT and OT, to finally get to a phase of maturity where your organization is going to be able to demonstrate and exchange information related to your compliance posture in a machine-readable format, and have like a board live control effectiveness type of situation. With that in mind, and before I close, one important caveat: in this conversation, all the stakeholders are going to have a crucial role. The operators and the owner of the critical infrastructure, the regulators and the supervisors, the auditors and the assessor, which role is going to still be key, even in process of automated processes, and perhaps even more important, to have them in the loop to validate the production of the automated pipeline. And then finally, the GRC and security vendors, which are going to be the enabler through the technology of the process I've just described. Now, I wanted to leave you with a very simple message that speaks to the idea of meaningful compliance, which to me is the compliance that is not just there to present or over-represent the work that you have done, but it's really a way to show that your security is solid. And that has to move necessarily from a situation of point-in-time assurance to a continuous assurance, because only that is going to bring to a demonstrable level of trust. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'll see you the next time.